seconds. We're going live, baby. Here we are, live, and Gary Gensler, everyone's least favorite man, going to be speaking live at the National Press Club luncheon on the topic of securities and AI. It's going to be real interesting. Hashtag fire Gary Gensler. Hashtag he's about to speak.
Chair Gensler's opening remarks. I'll ask as many as time permits. To submit a question online, please email headliners@press.org and put Gensler in the subject line. For our C-SPAN and public radio audiences, please be aware that in the audience today are members of the general public, so any applause you hear or reaction is not necessarily from working press. It is now my pleasure to introduce our distinguished head table. Please stand when your name is called. Starting on my right at the far end, Mark Wino, Senior Editor, CNET Money. Next, J.D. Durkin, a reporter and host at TheStreet.com. Next to J.D., Constance Marks of Constance Marks Productions. Next, we have Miriam Cross, technology reporter, American Banker. Next to Miriam, Kimberly Adams, host and senior Washington correspondent at Marketplace, and my immediate predecessor.
Really quick, guys, while they warm up and introduce everyone on this really long panel, make sure to smash the likes and subscribe, share the stream out, engage with the live stream. The more we engage, the more YouTube shows this stream to live people, or Twitter, over there on Twitter. So make sure to like, subscribe, retweet. You know the deal. Gensler joining us in a minute.
President of Stanton Communications and our headliners team leader, and one of our headliners team leaders. Now to my left, Eileen O'Reilly, National Press Club President and Styles and Standards Editor at Axios. We're having a terrific year so far under Eileen's leadership, and the turnout today is a symbol of how we're coming back strong with in-person events during Eileen's year. Next to Eileen, Emily Wilkins, Eileen. National Press Club Vice President and Washington correspondent at CNBC. Next to Emily is Scott Schneider, Director of the Office of Public Affairs, as well as counselor to Chair Gensler and a guest of the chairs. Next to Scott is Lydia Bayound, SEC and Financial Regulations Reporter at Bloomberg. Next to Lydia is Andrea Shalal, White House and Economics Correspondent at Reuters. Then we have Emily Schillinger, Senior Vice President, American Investments Council.
Take a nap during these intros. Oh my God. At the end,
we have Stephanie Allen, Director of Speech Writing in Chair Gensler's office and a guest of the chair.
Clap, clap. Now clap. Keep clapping. All right, now stop.
This is not my first rodeo, SEC Chair Gary Gensler told reporters following an appearance before the Senate Banking Committee last fall. He had just been grilled by Republicans and some Democrats on a range of issues, especially agency proposals that address climate reporting and environmental, social, and governance, or ESG investing. Indeed, Chair Gensler is familiar with the challenges of being a regulator under fire on Capitol Hill and elsewhere around Washington. He served as chair of the Commodity Futures Trading Commission from 2009 to 2014. During that time, he led the CFTC in enacting rules that reformed the $400 billion swaps market in the wake of the financial crisis. That was a heavy regulatory lift. Now he's undertaking another effort that some see as Herculean. The SEC's agenda contains 55 proposals in various stages of the rulemaking process. The proposals address a wide range of issues and market participants. One pending proposal is described as being, quote, related to investment advisor conflicts in the use of predictive analytics, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and similar technologies in connection with certain investor interactions. We're about to hear more from Chair Gensler on the intersection of artificial intelligence and securities regulation. Skeptics say Chair Gensler's agenda is overreaching, overlapping, and too aggressive. His supporters say he is pursuing crucial reforms. Chair Gensler has said his goal is to improve the efficiency and transparency of financial markets and reduce costs for investors. The rise of cryptocurrency has been another challenge for Chair Gensler. In recent weeks, the SEC's Division of Enforcement has taken several actions against crypto platforms that the SEC claims are operating as securities exchanges without following securities laws. A recent court ruling appears to have set back, to some extent, the SEC's crackdown on crypto exchanges. Emerging legislation could give the lion's share of crypto oversight to the SEC rather than to the CFTC rather than the SEC. Just as he's familiar with the cut and thrust of Washington politics, Chair Gensler also was steeped in knowledge about digital assets before he took the SEC helm in April 2021. Prior to being nominated by President Biden, Gensler was professor of global economics and management at MIT and served as senior advisor to the MIT Media Lab Digital Currency Initiative. In addition to his experience as a regulator and an academician, Chair Gensler has served as an assistant secretary of the Treasury and a congressional aide. He also worked for many years on Wall Street, where he was a partner at Goldman Sachs. If you've heard Chair Gensler testify before Congress or speak at an SEC open meeting, you also know that he is a fan of romantic comedies. Sometimes he relates that passion to SEC proposals. Perhaps he'll do so again today.
Watching something about Mary.
Please join me in giving a warm National Press Club welcome to SEC Chair Gary Gensler.
Chair Gensler. All right, here we go. Finally, Chair Gensler live, baby.
Thank you so much, Mark, for that kind introduction. I didn't know that you wanted me to talk about rom-coms today, but
no.
I instead have to start with this. As is customary, I'd like to note that my views are my own as chair of the Securities and Exchange Commission, and I'm not speaking on behalf of my fellow commissioners or the SEC staff. Nor, if I can add something to that disclaimer, am I speaking for or by a generative artificial intelligence model.
Certainly.
As the pandemic swept across Europe and the United Kingdom, pages are stuck together. Look at that. Maybe the AI model did do this.
It's not a joke.
As the pandemic swept across... Can you pull those?
Oh my God, can you remember where it swept across from? Have this out.
Thank you. Students packed up their books. They went home. One student at Trinity College in Cambridge left for his remote family farm, while in isolation, he continued his work on physics and math. Now, I'm talking about the 1660s here. And the bubonic plague. It is said that while in confinement, Isaac Newton contemplated gravity among other profound insights, including a new form of math, calculus. The math innovation, perhaps the bane of some of your high school experiences, and with journalists in the room, maybe just the bane of your college experiences or your children's experiences. The math innovation is embedded in so much of life, from pharmacology to finance. Well, in the beginning months of a more recent pandemic, when many 21st century students were packing up their books, going home, like Isaac Newton did 300 plus years earlier, there was a rollout of a new version of a generative AI intelligence model, GPT-3. Now that was already 3+ years ago. Given the health crisis, that release may not have gotten as much attention as the subsequent model release, ChatGPT-4, which was unveiled, yes, on Pi Day, March 14th. It's not
You
when
are
you eat
not
apple
funny,
and cherry
Gary.
pie. But on March 14th, the same day, Pi Day, 2 other companies also released a generative AI model. Interestingly, just 2 days later, China's largest search engine company, Baidu, also released ErnieBot, a Chinese language competitor. A lot of the recent buzz has been around such generative AI models, particularly large language models. AI, though, is much broader than just large language models. I believe it's the most transformative technology of our time, fully on par with the internet, fully on par with the mass production of automobiles. We don't know for sure where it will all head, but that transformative. Just like calculus, if I can for some journalists, just like calculus, the math underlying AI is built on a groundwork of many others. Newton built on many earlier mathematicians' work. One of them was René Descartes in the 17th century, and those mathematical achievements, the bane of some other people in this room, Cartesian planes and that famous linear transformation formula, y equals mx plus b. You might go, where is he headed? You can kind of figure out. I'm a bit of a math geek. I like rom-coms, and I also like to dance. So there you go. But you maybe could have figured that out if you were using generative AI. But similarly, AI and Newton's work on gravity both are based upon data and computational power. So it's not just the math. Newton built, of course, on Galileo's work, gathered data from other scientists' research, his computational power. Up here, his mind and his quill pen. Discussions about AI, though, go back at least to the mid-20th century. You may remember Alan Turing, Imitation Game, the Enigma Code. Well, in 1950, he wrote a seminal paper, Computing, Machinery, and Intelligence, opening with, quote, I propose to consider a question, can machines think? End quote. That's Alan Turing, 1950. In the 1980s, world chess champion Garry Kasparov claimed a computer would never beat a grandmaster. In 96, he beat IBM's Deep Blue. Only a year later, Garry Kasparov lost to Deep Blue. Fast forward 14 years, IBM's Watson used brute force computational power to win Jeopardy. That was 2011. Watson had been fed more than 200 million pages of documents from dictionaries to novels. Ken Jennings, the Jeopardy champ at the time, wrote on the screen during the final Jeopardy, I, for one, welcome our new computer overlords. Think about that. That was 12 years ago, Ken Jennings. In 2016, AlphaGo, using new forms of AI, defeated a human world champion in the complex game of Go. Though perhaps not catching as many headlines as these computer versus human experiences and these challenges, or even ChatGPT, we're already seeing a lot of adoption of AI. Text prediction in our mobile devices and emails have been commonplace. The U.S. Postal Service, by God, the U.S. Postal Service uses and has been using AI to predict the addresses from human handwriting. How else could they read Gary Gensler's handwriting? It's being used for natural language processing, translation software, recommender systems, radiology. Yes, our radiologists can see better patterns as to whether that looks like a tumor or not from AI. Robotics and your virtual assistant. I'm talking about, Siri and so forth, and Erica, not that movie Her with Scarlett Johansson.
No more puns.
That was a good movie.
No more puns.
In finance, AI already is being used for call centers, account openings, compliance programs, trading algorithms, sentiment analysis. In fact, this talk may go into a computer that discerns the sentiment of the chair of the SEC. What they find, I don't know. And more. It's also fueled a rapid change in robo-advisors and brokerage app. Look, just as Newton's work on gravity was based on math, data, and computational powers, that's the three. Math, data, computational powers. All three are fueling AI progress today. The math underlying AI has moved from brute force computing, like what happened in that Jeopardy or what happened to Gary Kasparov, from brute force computing power to what's called neural networks to deep learning. What that math will be in 10 years may move on. Neural networks are inspired in part by the brain's architecture, having layers of individual nodes or, yes, neurons. The parameters, and to speak math, parameters are these coefficients, like the M and the B back to those Descartes. But the parameters, the coefficients relating the connections between the neurons, no longer number in the hundreds, they number in the thousands, millions, or even billions. Descartes would have been pretty impressed. And collectively, the models are being optimized to discern patterns in data and making predictions. We also, though, are living in an era of exponential data growth. Data is being drawn, of course, from social media footprints, our shopping, our spending, but more than that, it's also being drawn by an explosion of sensors. Cell phones, of course, fitness devices, telematics in the cars, the actual sensors in the cars, appliances, cameras, and other so-called Internet of Things sensors. I recently installed a new heating and air conditioning unit in my home, and I was asked for my Wi-Fi code so that could tie into the internet. And someone, I guess, has another bit of information on the chair of the SEC. I turned it off. I just want to say for the record, it's not, there are bound to be more sensors than humans in the United States. We also see in the early stages of what's called multimodal artificial intelligence systems. That's where you combine multiple types of data, video, audio, speech, images, text, and you try to make even more accurate determinations when you have multimodals coming in at you. The computational power, what can I say? I mean, Moore's law was, Gordon Moore laid it out in 1965 about the ability to increasingly, exponentially have more computational power. So it's math, it's data, computational power. This is in a forward direction. It's likely to continue. Now, AI opens up tremendous opportunities for humanity, from healthcare to science to finance. As machines take on pattern recognition, particularly when done at scale, this can create great efficiencies across the economy. In finance, there's potential benefits in greater financial inclusion, enhanced user experience. When Newton pondered the laws of gravity, he thought in the micro, the apple. He thought about the macro, the cosmos. So, if I could be inspired by Newton a little bit, and in that vein, talk about AI's advances, what they might mean in the micro to each of us as individuals, and the macro to the broader economy and society. So starting on the micro, what I might call narrowcasting, as opposed to broadcasting for all you journalists. Narrowcasting. Today, AI models provide an increasing ability to make predictions about each and every one of us as an individual. This growing capability facilitates being able to differentially communicate to each of us and to do so efficiently at scale. How might we respond to an individualized communication? How might we respond to an individualized product offering? How might we respond to an individualized pricing? Communication, products, pricing can really tailored and individualized. In other words, narrowcasting. Quite a difference from Turing's day at the dawn of network broadcasting. On a daily basis already, we receive messages from AI recommender systems that are considering how we might, individuals, respond to the prompts. The models have been developed to assist in making decisions already about who gets jobs, who gets loans, who gets credit, who might get the entry into a school, who might even get a healthcare outcome, whether that MRI is going to be for us or somebody else. And that's just to name a few. This raises a host of issues, not necessarily new to AI, but accentuated it. One is when I was at MIT and studying artificial intelligence, we used to talk about explainability, bias, and what the computer scientists called robustness. You might call accuracy. AI models' decisions and outcomes often are unexplainable. Part of this is the inherent models themselves, the math. Remember that math I was trying to describe? It's nonlinear. It's hyperdimensional, meaning it's up to thousands or even billions of dimensions.
Whoa.
And thus, it's hard to explain, but it's also dynamic. It learns from new data and from the model's use, so it's not static. Thus, the insights that come out of such models by design are inherently challenging to interpret in terms of accessibility for us humans. Why does the model, for instance, qualify one of us for a loan and somebody else not for the loan? AI also makes it more difficult to ensure for fairness. The outcomes of its predictive algorithms may be based on data reflecting historical biases, as well as latent features that may inadvertently be proxies for protected characteristics right in the data itself. Further, the challenges of explainability may mask underlying systemic racism and bias right in the predictive data analytics. The ability of these predictive models to predict doesn't mean they are always accurate either. They might be predicting based upon some latent feature that leads to a false prediction. Does the model look at a photo of a dog and say it's a dog, or is it a cat? A couple of years ago, this was back in 2019, my identical twin brother, Rob, hands me his iPhone and he says, "What do you see?" I say, "I see text messages." He says, "Dang." He said, "That was set on facial recognition for Rob Gensler, not Gary Gensler." Now you might say, that's okay. Identical twin. But these challenges of data analytics are not new. In the late 60s, early 70s, Congress weighed in. Fair Credit Reporting Act, Fair Housing Act, Equal Credit Opportunity Act were all in part for similar issues, making sure that people had explainable and fair and unbiased consumer credit and housing and the like. As advisors and brokers incorporate these technologies in their services, the advice and recommendations they offer, whether or not based on AI, must be in the best interest of clients and retail customers and not place the interest of investors, or place their interest, the AI model's interest, ahead of the investors. There's also a possibility about rent extractions and conflicts. The communications, product offerings, and pricing can be narrowly targeted for each and every one of us. And that means there may be more able to find each of our own maximum willingness to pay a price or purchase a product. And with such narrow casting, there's a greater chance to shift what's called in economics consumer welfare from us, the consumers, to the producers, extracting more rents in our economy. And if the optimization function in the AI system is taking the interest of the platform into consideration, if the math is taking into consideration that.
Remember the math,
then this can have a conflict. In finance, conflicts may arise to the extent that advisors or brokers are optimizing, placing their interest ahead of investors' interest. And that's why I've asked the SEC staff to make recommendations for rule proposals on what Mark mentioned is on our unified agenda for us to consider regarding how best to address such potential conflicts. Deception. Deception in the narrow casting, there's also deception in the broadcast world. But since antiquity, bad actors have found new ways to deceive the public. Of course, with AI, fraudsters have a new tool to exploit. They may try to do it in a narrow casting way, preying upon our personal vulnerabilities. We used to get spam, but we'd all get the same spam. Now communications be efficiently individualized. And as a former faculty member, I also ponder how generative AI will lead to changes in teaching methods, academic integrity, guarding against plagiarism. I don't know what I would do in the classroom anymore. Was it back to the old blue books? Deception also can be broadcasted, of course. And earlier this month, my communications director, Scott Schneider, sitting over there, he contacted me. He said, "Lots of rumors on the internet today that you're resigned." You'd tell me if you did, right? Yes, Scott, I would tell you.
Do it.
The false rumor had apparently been from an AI-generated text on a recently stood-up Twitter account. More seriously, bad actors may seek to use AI to influence elections, the capital markets, or spook the public, potentially making Orson Welles' 1938 The War of the Worlds radio broadcast look tame. I say that because I'm in a room full of the National Press Club. Make no mistake, though, under the securities law, fraud is fraud. The SEC is focused on identifying and prosecuting any form of fraud that may threaten investors' capital formation or the markets more broadly, whether it's generative AI or not. Lastly, the public companies making statements on AI opportunities and risk that we oversee, they need to take care to ensure that the material disclosures are accurate and don't deceive investors. Let me turn to the macro. There's been a lot written about it. Just as any historic transformative time, whether we were moving automation of the farm, the factory, and services, there are going to be macro challenges for society writ large. To the extent that generative AI and other AI technologies have the potential to automate a significant percentage of how workers spend their time, it could lead to significant changes in jobs and job markets. I mean, if they're automating that which we do now as workers. AI, particularly given its transformative nature, also is shaping up as yet another way in which China, on the one hand, and the US compete economically and technologically. There also are macro and geopolitical challenges for state actors and militaries, potential use of AI, and further, back to Ken Jennings, remember of Jeopardy fame. He may have just been joking when he wrote that thing about Welcome to the Overlord, but there are now leading AI technologists, some of the sort of, fathers and mothers of AI that were at the foundation of all of this, who are fearful that AI becoming our overlords. Look, while these are important policy debates around macro issues, I'm going to focus on two sets of macro issues that are more towards the economics here. We've seen in our economy how one or a small number of tech platforms can come to dominate a field. There are a number of reasons we may see this as well in AI platforms, given that today's AI relies on an insatiable demand for data, computational power, there are economics of scale and data networks at play. We've already seen companies, both incumbents and startup, relying on base or foundation AI models and building applications on top of them. The downstream applications use the base models, and they're called base for a reason, or foundation for a reason. They build upon them, and they can be improved in the process, refining their parameters based upon the downstream's application, meaning the base model, the generative model, can improve from time to time based on all that usage. This not only will enhance the base model, but it will give them greater competitive advantage, adding to the possibility of having just one or maybe a small number of base models. We've seen that in a lot of other places in technology. I believe the multimodal AI systems I mentioned earlier will probably even add to that. Once again, what's this raise? It raises some really real economic issues.
Really real ones.
The debate around privacy I mentioned earlier initially had been about who owns individual data, but now it's are individuals not only in control of their own data, but it also has this important debate about the scraping of all this data into the base model. So today, today's AI reveals this related issue, that data being collected on each of us, we're all helping train the models. We are personally helping. I'm not just talking about when you go in and say whether the cal is upside down or this way or that way to identify getting in. I'm talking about every time anyone in this room uses one of these generative AI models, you are helping them collect data.
Are these models in the room with us right now?
And the base models are training off of the downstream applications if they so wish. So whose data is it? This debate's currently playing out right now in Hollywood with, strikes in Hollywood. It's playing out in software developers. It's playing out in social media, where major social media companies are trying to put gating on their information. It raises questions about economic rents at the macro level. The platforms may garner greater economic rents if they become so dominant. Now, what does it mean for the SEC? The challenge here is to promote competitive, efficient capital markets. That's our remit: competitive, efficient, fair markets. In the face of what could be a dominant base layer at the center of the capital markets, I believe we really have to closely have to assess this and make sure that we continue to promote that competition, transparency, and fair access in the middle of the market. It also raises some issues about financial stability, the possibility that one or even a small number of platforms are there. While I was at MIT, Lily Bailey and I wrote a paper, a stem winder. I'm sure you all read it. It was called Deep Learning and Financial Stability.
I did.
This was in, you did? Oh
No.
my gosh.
No, I didn't.
A prize. Written in November, or published in November of 2020. The recent advances of generative AI models make the challenges Lily and I wrote about even more real. AI may heighten financial fragility as it could promote herding with all the individual actors, the downstream applications, making similar decisions because they're getting some signal from the base model or data aggregator. This could encourage basically a monoculture. And all study of biology, all study of financial markets, when you tend towards monocultures, you tend towards fragility. It also could exacerbate the inherent network interconnectedness of a global financial system, relying on what might be one or maybe two or three base models. Thus, AI may play a central role in the after-action reports of future financial crisis. And people will say, oh my God, everybody was getting the same mortgage data or mortgage pricing from that base model somewhere, which will be hard to explain, and we won't even maybe know it for a while, but I think this unfortunately may well be in our future. And with current model risk management guidance, while we need to update, we at the SEC, maybe the other regulators update individual model risk management, this is about the system as a whole, and so I really think that we're going to have to come together and think about what we do in what's called a macro-prudential way. Let me wrap it up. I'm sure I've gone too long.
Please do.
We've come a long way from Newton contemplating an apple in the cosmos. He would marvel at the math, the data, and computational power. He'd probably be intrigued by this fact that AI is actually helping refine data to detect gravitational waves as well as its use every day. Gravitational waves was not from Newton, it was from Einstein.
How many ideas have you gone over?
We at the SEC are technology neutral. So just like our treatment of calculus, we focus on the outcomes rather than the tools. We don't have any regulation at the SEC on calculus. We look at the outcomes. Securities law, though, may be implicated depending upon how AI technology is used. Within our current authorities, we're focused on protecting against both the micro and macro challenges I mentioned. And while recognizing the challenges, we at the SEC also could benefit from staff making greater use of AI in their market surveillance and disclosure review, exams, enforcement, and the like. I think AI is going to continue significantly transforming science, technology, and commerce. I suspect Newton, though, would agree that it's important to focus on these micro and macro challenges of AI. And given that we're dealing with literally the automation of human intelligence, the gravity of these challenges is real. Lastly, a disclaimer. Though these remarks likely will be analyzed by AI models, they are not the product of any generative AI. They're all human.
Wow.
Mark.
Deep. So deep. There you go, bud.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Gensler. Just stand here. I'll read questions from the audience.
Ooh.
At lunch this weekend, my wife suggested that I ask ChatGPT what it would ask Chair Gensler regarding AI. We entered that prompt, and ChatGPT came up with 12 pretty good queries. Here's number 10. How does the SEC balance the need for innovation and technological advancements in the securities industry with the necessity of maintaining market integrity and investor protection when it comes to artificial intelligence?
Well, ChatGPT, if I could answer back to you, and you will maybe refine your model based on this. We're technology neutral. This three-part mission Congress laid out: protecting investors, promoting capital
Where's the
formation,
laughs?
the issuers, and then the markets in the middle. That's our three-part mission, and we will continue ChatGPT to focus on that.
Talking to
But in so
ChatGPT.
doing, we have to look at the outcomes of the use of your technology, Mr. or Mrs. ChatGPT. And in looking at that, I do think that there's challenges around protecting investors about the conflicts of robo-advisors. I should look at the camera, right?
Yeah, maybe.
The ChatGPT and other AI models, the conflicts that can arise if robo-advisors are considering their interest ahead of yours. I also think that we have to be on guard against fraud and deception in the markets, because fraud is fraud. And thirdly, I think there's some issues that this could accentuate fragility in our financial markets.
From this point on, all the questions are from humans.
You
Boo.
say.
Does the SEC have the resources and knowledge it needs to be able to regulate the financial industry's use of AI? If not, what's your plan to get them?
It's a really good question. I think this is a challenge for all the government agencies I've spoken with about this, not just financial regulators. This is a really rapidly changing technology. And hiring good technologists in a very tight labor market for said technologists is a challenge for government agencies. We do use some AI at the SEC in our economics and some market surveillance and the like, but we really do, I believe, could benefit, and the American public, the investing public, could benefit by our being able to ramp up. Part of it is asking Congress for more appropriations and resources for technology. But I think that we do have capable technologists, but this is like a step function, a real change in the underlying technology.
Should the SEC be the primary regulator of AI in finance, given the wide range of AI applications across industries and potential challenges with understanding and monitoring this rapidly evolving technology?
I think the Securities and Exchange Commission has a really important remit over $100 trillion capital markets, and it's the securities laws. But that's where we should stay. And to your question, there's other financial regulators, the banking regulators, the Commodity Futures Trading Commission that I was once honored to be at, and others, the Consumer Bureau, that have really important roles. We at the SEC, I think, when we think about artificial intelligence, again, it's like how we think about calculus. We're not about regulating an individual technology. It's about the use of that technology and the outcomes, and ensuring that those outcomes are within the appropriate public policy that Congress has put in place.
What are the main challenges and opportunities you see regarding the use of AI in investment advice? You touched on that in your speech, but if you could elaborate.
I think that it really does provide a potential to be much more effective and efficient. The narrow casting I spoke about, it has some challenges, but it has benefits. That each and every one of us might have a different circumstance about our risk appetite, about our family life, our employment, our mortgage, our stage of life, and taking those into consideration and really giving us effective and efficient advice. It's in essence also an ability to automate a lot of what we humans have done. We've automated in the past when we automated much what happened in other parts of our economy. So I think that's really a great potential. But it raises these other micro and macro challenges of narrow casting and then sort of finding a way to steer us potentially into the wrong product for us because of the conflicts that are there as well, or to even worse, deceive us.
And we have one other AI question. AI is expected to have a global economic impact of approximately $15 trillion by the end of this decade. Should public companies assess the potential impact on their organization?
We at the Securities and Exchange Commission are paid to be merit neutral. I do think this is the most transformative technology of our time, every bit as much as the internet or automobile, mass production of the automobile 100 years ago. But what any one company does is up to them. Their material disclosures about it should be accurate. Roosevelt said that our securities laws, the first securities law, was about the truth in securities law. That's what he called it. And so we're about full, fair, and truthful disclosure, and then investors get to decide. So that's up to the companies. Just ensure that your disclosures are not misleading.
Of course, you won't be surprised. There's a lot of interest in cryptocurrency today.
Ooh, he said it.
Really?
He said
Yes.
it.
And is this from ChatGPT?
No, everything is
It
from humans
wasn't
now.
funny the
Okay.
first time.
How does the federal court ruling last week in the Ripple case impact your stance toward digital asset regulation? Does it inject urgency into the need for federal legislation to clarify regulatory oversight of this industry?
Look, our mission remains exactly what I spoke about earlier, about investor protection, promoting capital formation, and the markets in the middle. This is a recent decision, just a handful of days ago. We were pleased from that decision, recognizing the importance of protecting investors on the institutional investors in that, and that the court movement with regard to fair notice, and while disappointed on what they said about retail investors, we're still looking at it and assessing that opinion.
What is the next frontier for the SEC's crypto enforcement push?
It's really, by the way, I'm going to step back a little bit. When I was so honored to go up to MIT in 2018 and get involved at the intersection of finance and technology. And I was honored to do that with this remarkable scientists and technologists and students and staff at MIT. And in 2018 and in 2023, I found it fascinating, this focus on digital currencies and crypto by the press, with all respect, and even the retail investing public, in contrast to artificial intelligence. I, for one, have already stated here clearly, I think artificial intelligence is the transformative technology of our
You
times.
love it, buddy.
As it relates to cryptocurrencies, our role at the SEC is, again, protecting the markets, the investing public, the capital formation, and ensuring for compliance with the laws that are the books. Congress passed them. That's what we're doing. So what's next? We're going to continue to try to bring firms that may not be into compliance without prejudging any one of them, and trying to ensure that we protect the investing public. The basic bargain that was laid out for you, the listening public, was that you get to decide what investments you make, but folks that are raising money from you, that you get full, fair, and truthful disclosure from them. And without that disclosure, how can you be insured as to what risks you're taking? And that the platforms, the intermediaries that are transacting in securities have basic protections against conflicts, against fraud, against manipulation. And you have a field, crypto field, that's been rife with fraud and abuse. I think we've seen this story before, and it's called the 1920s, and it was prior to the securities laws coming into being.
And one other crypto question. You, along with other regulators, have heard this term, regulation by enforcement. The audience member asks, why take a regulation by enforcement approach towards crypto rather than regulation by rulemaking similar to the EU with their MiCA framework?
In all of our work, we take a number of approaches. We have a number of tools that Congress has given us. And the rules are on the books already. If you're a security and you having the public, you're offering and selling securities, the public, under the law, is to get proper disclosure. If you're transacting in said securities, whether they're crypto securities, equity securities, bonds, securities-based swaps, like it's 30 plus things on the list in this in the statute. And if any type of security, investment contracts are what some of these crypto securities are, then you're supposed to have certain protections. That's what we're doing. But to your question, we have engaged. We've done some rulemaking around special purpose broker-dealers or broker-dealers in this space. We've done notice and comment rulemaking about rules about exchanges, about safeguarding or custodying, as well as something called best execution. And we've spoken through also various enforcement actions, and it is something we do. The way we protect the market against insider trading from the 1960s to now has been speaking to the market on a somewhat regular basis through enforcement actions. We bring over 700 enforcement actions a year because Congress has put us here to protect you, the investing public, and be a cop on the beat.
Something related to cryptocurrency, the Bitcoin ETF. What more do you need to see to be confident that a spot Bitcoin ETF is actually ready for prime time? And is the potential for market manipulation still the largest holdup to spot ETF approval?
Well, Mark, I recognize the question. It's a good question, but understanding that as chair of a regulatory agency and having various applications in front of us and not prejudging them, and also recognizing that there is ongoing litigation about these very matters, I think I'm going to have to defer on that one.
Gary sucks.
But good try.
Fair enough.
You could ask ChatGPT.
I will do that.
Oh my God.
Maybe this evening. I will, after the club board meeting, I'll type that prompt in and see what happens. Of course,
you can't just say ChatGPT and it be a joke, Gary. It's not how jokes work.
Having to do with the environment is big for your agency and others across the government. Several congressional Democrats have expressed concern about the SEC's plans to require big companies to disclose their Scope 3 emissions, saying the potential requirement could hurt small farmers. More recently, Representative David Scott of Georgia, the top Democrat on House Ag, brought up this concern during one of the House's ESG hearings last week. Does this concern surprise you? Will Scott and other Democrats be satisfied with the final climate disclosure rule?
Very good questions. Let me step back again for the audience and the listening public. Again, the Securities and Exchange Commission is merit neutral. I think those debates in the 1930s landed it about right. It's about full, fair, and truthful disclosure. So investors in our capital markets have been for a number of years investing in companies. In part, what's the climate risk of that company? The company's future path, their future profits, their prospects, their revenues, given climate risk. And over half of the top 1,000 companies in the US currently make disclosures around their greenhouse gas emissions, and well over half make some disclosures around climate risk, how that management team. So what we did was we put out a proposal last year, a little over a year ago, to try to bring some consistency and, yes, comparability to those disclosures. Now, to the specific question about one form of greenhouse gas emission, we did hear a lot from commenters. We put a proposal out. We got over 15,000 comments from the public, the more than in any other proposal in the history of the Securities and Exchange Commission. It gets top volume weighted comment file. And so we did hear a lot about said Scope 3. I'm not allowed to prejudge, but we're taking a close look at it. We're considering it, staff's considering it, and ultimately 5 commissioners. So I hope the representatives would understand that and ultimately appreciate wherever we come out. But we've got some work still to do.
Well, what is the timeline for the climate disclosure rule, the ESG rules? Can you give us any hint?
So we really do this thoughtfully, by the book, consider the economics, consider the legal authorities, and with 15 or 16,000 comments in the file, this one's a little longer than maybe standard, but I don't have a time. It's really when the staff is ready and when the commission is ready to put something out and adopt it.
Is that now?
One other.
Sorry, I didn't make news there, Mark.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. The SEC plans to release a human capital disclosure rule. What information do you think companies should be disclosing that many choose not to report now? Are diversity statistics among them?
Again, it goes to investor demand. What do investors wish to know about a company that they find material and that's important for them in their investing? And for years, investors have wanted to know something about this important asset of a company. Its workforce, its human capital, so to speak. And that's what's important. 3 years ago, my predecessor, under Chair Clayton and that commission, they put in place some new provisions around human capital disclosure. We've looked at those filings in 2021 and 2022 and sort of learned from what companies are doing, and staff is considering, and I think the commission will consider, how we can bring some more, again, consistency to the disclosures that have happening so far about that. It's really a critical asset. I mean, I hope it remains the critical asset. I mean, we were talking about automating the human side with AI. I really do believe it's a critical asset of these entities and how to ensure for that consistent material disclosure.
You mentioned 15,000 comment letters on climate disclosure. Industry, and in some instances academics, legislators, and retail shareholders have criticized aspects of the Commission's recent proposals, as well as Hill Republicans. They have their ESG month right now. A lot of that is aimed at you and trying to halt these proposals. How do you and your staff go about taking into account or weighing these comments when formulating a final rule, and to what extent do they influence you? Does the pushback influence you, or is your mind sort of made up?
No. As opposed to ChatGPT, we're dynamic every day. We're updating for the comments we receive. That's the administrative process, and I contend it's the human process. That's what we are. And so we get, even this meeting here that's telecast, I'm a human, I'm a living, breathing person. I get a question about scope 3. It's all part of what we do, but then we have to document these things. We bring it together, we assess the economics, we assess the law, but the comments, whether they be from Congress in these, various forms of letters and hearings, or whether it's from the open public, very much are taken into consideration in a dynamic, real way.
One thing that your skeptics, or even opponents, I guess I should say, bring up again and again and again when they don't like a proposal is they say the SEC doesn't have the authority to do that. And now they can point to EPA versus West Virginia, the big question, I forget the term for it, but the major questions doctrine.
You got it,
Yeah,
Mark.
major
That's
questions
good.
Doctrine that, if Congress didn't give you the authority to do something, you can't do it. The SEC and other federal agencies have recently faced pushback by the Supreme Court and other courts. What are your views as to the limits of SEC authority, and are you concerned that these proposals are going to be, these final rules are going to be stopped in the courts?
We live in a democracy. It's Congress that sets the law, the courts who interpret the law, the SEC.
Isaac Newton.
We do our work within our authorities and how the courts interpret their authorities.
The fuck is this guy
the Supreme
saying?
Court when they write an opinion, that's the law of the land. So we work consistently to do that. Of course, we're human as best we can. And so we do take into consideration these recent court opinions and really think through. Now, in terms of the SEC's authority for disclosure, we've been tasked since the 1930s to promote this consistent, comparable, or as Roosevelt said, truth in securities law. He once said it was about complete information. He didn't put the word materiality in, but we have a concept of materiality. That's how we think about it. But the court decisions are important to us.
A source told me the other day, October is the new April when it comes to the SEC agenda, because so many rules that you had planned to go final in April are now final in October, and perhaps that'll be extended again in the next regulatory agenda. As we get closer to 2024 and the 2024 election, to what extent are you concerned that final rules could be overturned by Congress the closer you get to the election next year, if Republicans take control of the whole government?
So let me just address two things. We, twice a year, as all government agencies do, put out a regulatory agenda, and it's published by the Office of Management and Budget. So we put some estimates as to when things will happen, and we've just put it in two buckets, April and October, and you'll see that the next one that comes out will be October and April.
April and October, and October and April.
Faster,
Got it.
sometimes things go a little slower. To your other question, we will only finalize something if we think it's right and it's ready, not with an eye to the clock, but just to the eye to the law and the policy and the economics. We have finalized today, during my time, 19 adopting releases. We have 30 or 35 proposals that are not yet adopted, and we'll go through. We've also reopened or reproposed a number of those based on the comments, the economics, the law.
All right. And one final question. A lot of these major rules come out with 3-2 votes, you and your two fellow Democratic commissioners in favor, and the Republican Sester Person, Mark Ueda, against. Is that good, bad, or indifferent for rulemaking?
We all work really well together, the five of us, and I've been honored to be the chair of another commission at one point in time at the federal level and one at the state level in Maryland. I think it's a really strong form of democracy that we have these different views. Five of us bring different aspects and different backgrounds and perspectives to the law and the economics and the policy. And we work and get feedback from all five of us back and forth. But there are times that we see things differently, and that's part of democracy and human life.
Is it?
We've had a fair number of unanimous votes too, Mark.
Is it, Gary?
It seems like just like at the Supreme Court, they don't focus as much on that, but yeah.
Lizard man.
Okay, fair enough. Before if I could step forward, state.
Get off the stage, Gary. Get off. Don't make another ChatGPT joke. Shut up.
Before I ask the final question, let me take a moment to thank the organizers of today's events. Headliners team co-leaders Donna Leinwan-Leger, who is not with us today, and Lori Russo, who I introduced earlier. Club membership director Kate Helster, club events coordinator Cecily Scott Martin, and club executive director Didier Soji. I'd also like to say thank you to the kitchen staff and the wait staff. This was another delicious
They were the
lunch.
best. Thank you. That lunch was amazing. It was a really good lunch.
Let me also take a moment to remind you of our upcoming headliners events. On September 5th, we will welcome Nobel Peace Prize laureate Maria Ressa, who will address the threats facing press freedom worldwide and the opportunities for civil society to respond. On September 13th, we'll hear from award-winning Washington Post reporter Laura Meckler, who will discuss her new book, Dreamtown, Shaker Heights, and the Quest for Racial Equity. It's also my honor to present you, Chair Gensler, with the much-coveted National Press Club mug. Which all...
Okay.
which all speakers receive. And
I want one.
It's an honor. It's below the gift limit.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And our last question, you said you weren't prepared for this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Your favorite rom-com and why?
Oh my God.
Oh my
In
God.
the spirit
He's
of the
right.
day, Her was really quite good.
You would.
I think that Scarlett
would.
Johansson playing that, I guess you would call it love interest bot. If you haven't seen it, they do a futuristic, what might be Los Angeles, but you're not quite sure. Even the clothing is different. You'll notice nobody wears belts. Just these small features.
No one wears
But I think in the
belts?
spirit of the day, I would mention that. But look,
Nobody
Katharine
even wears
Hepburn,
belts.
and I just have to say that Kate Hepburn and the movies that she made probably are at the core of some of the best rom-coms. I think people think that Bringing Up Baby wasn't really one of her
Is
best.
this
I
real
get it.
life?
Connie,
Is
who's
this
with me
real
today,
life?
tells me, Gary, you're a little off on that one.
Is this real?
But then when you get a little bit further along and you look at Kate Hepburn, what she did with Spencer Tracy, what she did with Cary Grant and everything, there's just an incredible run of rom-coms. But look, the 1990s were great. There's a lot of really great. So.
Wow.
Chair Gensler, thank you for being here today.
Gensler. Sure, Gensler. Wow, that was ridiculous. We learned today that Gary Gensler is terrible at jokes, thinks that just saying ChatGPT is a joke. Didn't really address much, though we did hear the words cryptocurrency a bunch of times. That was nice. No definitive answers there. So it seems that delicious lunch they served up was another nothing burger. Thanks for joining us, guys. Make sure you subscribe, join the channel, jump in the Discord. Sign up with our sponsors, Fairdesk and Femex. We'll be live again Wednesday at the latest. Bitcoin doing not much. Love you, fans.